You're not just a viewer, you're part of this journey. Subscribe today, and let's make 1,000 subscribers our shared victory. My phone screen lit up with 49 missed calls. 49. All from my parents. And I remember staring at that number, feeling nothing but calm, because just 1 hour earlier, on live national television, my father had been erased from the biggest day of my life, and he had done it to himself. If you had told me 2 years ago that my own father would refuse to watch me receive one of the highest honors a soldier can earn, I would have laughed. I would have said, "Not my dad. He's proud of me." But pride, I learned, only exists in some families when it's convenient. And on the day I needed him most, he chose to disappear. This is the story of how one empty chair changed everything. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand why sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who teach us the hardest lessons. My name doesn't matter as much as what I became. I grew up in a small town, the middle child in a family that valued image over everything else. My older brother was the golden child, good grades, good job, good wife. My younger sister was the baby, always protected, always excused. And me? I was the one who never quite fit the mold my parents wanted. When I told my father I was joining the military, he didn't yell. He just looked at me like I had chosen to throw my life away. "You could have done something respectable," he said. "Something the family could be proud of." As if serving my country wasn't respectable enough for him. But I didn't join for his approval. I joined because I wanted to matter, to stand for something bigger than myself. Basic training broke me down and built me back up into someone stronger than I ever imagined. Deployment after deployment, I proved myself, not to my father, but to myself and to the soldiers beside me who became my true family. Through all of it, my aunt was the one who called every week. She was the one who sent care packages, who cried on the phone when I told her about hard days, who never once made me feel small. While my parents kept their distance, she stepped in and filled a space they had left empty. I didn't know it yet, but she would end up filling something even bigger. Then came the mission that changed the course of my life. I won't go into every detail, but I will tell you this. I made a choice in a dangerous moment to protect the people beside me instead of protecting myself. It wasn't about being brave. It was about not being able to live with myself if I hadn't acted. Months later, I received a call from my commanding officer. My hands were shaking as I listened. I had been recommended for the Silver Star, one of the highest awards for valor in combat. I sat in silence for a long moment after hanging up, not sure if I should laugh or cry. The first person I called wasn't my father. It was my aunt. She screamed with joy so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "I always knew," she kept saying. "I always knew you were meant for something amazing." When I finally called my parents, my mother congratulated me politely, almost like she was reading from a script. My father said only 5 words. "That's nice. Good for you." No excitement. No pride. Just distance, the same distance that had followed me my entire life. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need his approval anymore. But somewhere deep down, a small part of me still hoped that this, finally, would be the thing that made him proud. The ceremony was set to be broadcast on national television, a rare honor reserved for only the most significant recognitions. I was allowed to invite close family, and I was given a small number of VIP seats reserved right in the front row, seats meant for the people who mattered most in my life. I called my father myself. I invited him personally. I told him how much it would mean to me if he was there, sitting in that front row, watching his child be honored in front of the country. There was a long pause on the phone. Then he said the words that would replay in my mind for the rest of my life. "We will never stand next to you. You are the disgrace of this family." I didn't understand where this anger came from. Yes, we had our differences. Yes, he never approved of my path. But disgrace? I had served my country. I had risked everything for the people beside me. And somehow, in his eyes, that made me an embarrassment. Later, I learned the real reason. My father had built his identity around control, around his children following the paths he approved of. My success on my own terms, without his blessing, wasn't something to celebrate. It was something that threatened the image he had built of himself as the head of a respectable family. My achievement had nothing to do with him, and that was exactly what he couldn't forgive. He refused to attend. My mother, caught in the middle as always, chose silence over standing beside me. The seat meant for my father sat empty in my plans, just days before the biggest moment of my life. I could have spent those final days crying, begging, trying to convince my father to change his mind. Instead, I made a decision. If he didn't want to stand next to me, then someone who actually stood by me through everything deserved that seat instead. I called my aunt. I told her what happened, and I asked her to be my guest of honor, to sit in that front row VIP seat meant for family. She cried on the phone. She told me it would be the greatest honor of her life. That decision changed something inside me. I stopped waiting for approval that was never coming. I stopped shrinking myself to fit into my father's idea of what I should be. For the first time, I chose to celebrate my own life on my own terms, surrounded by people who actually valued me. This wasn't about revenge in the way people usually think of it. I wasn't trying to hurt my father. I was simply refusing to let his absence define my biggest day. I was choosing joy over grief, family over blood, love over obligation. And little did I know that one small decision was about to be witnessed by millions of people, live, in a moment none of us saw coming. 6. The ceremony begins. The day of the ceremony arrived. Cameras lined the room. Officials, fellow soldiers, and families filled the seats. My aunt sat proudly in the front row, wearing a navy blue dress, tears already forming in her eyes before the event had even started. When my name was called, I walked forward in my uniform, my heart pounding louder than the applause around me. The commanding officer spoke about the mission, about courage under pressure, about a decision I made in seconds that saved lives. I stood tall, but my eyes kept drifting to that front row, to the seat where my aunt sat instead of my father. As the medal was placed around my neck, the room erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. The moment I had trained my entire life for was finally happening. But the story wasn't over yet. Because right after the formal ceremony, something happened that none of us, not me, not my aunt, not even the Pentagon officials, fully expected to unfold live on television. As part of the broadcast, a senior official stepped forward to speak about the importance of military families, about the sacrifices made not just by soldiers, but by the people who support them from home. Then he turned toward my aunt. He explained that after learning her story, how she had supported me through every deployment, every hardship, every moment my own parents had stepped back, the Pentagon wanted to recognize her as well. A special civilian appreciation award was presented to her, along with an all-expenses-paid trip and a generous financial gift honoring military support networks. My aunt broke down in tears in front of the cameras. She hadn't expected any recognition. She had simply shown up, again and again, without asking for anything in return. And now, on national television, the world was witnessing exactly what real family looked like, not blood, not obligation, but loyalty and love freely given. The room stood and applauded. I watched my aunt, overwhelmed, clutching the certificate to her chest, and I felt something settle inside me. This wasn't planned. This wasn't revenge I orchestrated. It was simply the universe rewarding the person who deserved it at the exact moment my father had chosen to be absent. Within an hour, my phone began buzzing uncontrollably. I looked down to see 49 missed calls, almost all of them from my parents. Text messages followed, one after another. Why didn't you tell us she would be featured? Everyone is asking why your father wasn't there. This is embarrassing for the family. I sat there reading message after message, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel the need to explain myself or apologize. My father had made his choice days earlier, when he told me I was a disgrace. He couldn't take that back, now just because the world was watching. I finally called my mother back. Her voice was shaking. She said reporters had reached out asking about the family dynamic, about why the soldier's father wasn't present for such a historic honor. Suddenly, the absence my father had been so comfortable with became a public question he couldn't control. I told my mother calmly, "You both had your chance to stand beside me. You chose not to. I'm not going to apologize for choosing someone who did." Later that night, my father finally called. His voice was different, quieter, almost unsure of itself. He didn't apologize right away. Instead, he tried to explain himself, saying he never expected the ceremony to become such a big public event, that he didn't realize people would ask questions. I stopped him and asked one simple question. Would it have mattered if no cameras were there? Would you still have called me a disgrace? Silence. That silence told me everything I needed to know. His anger was never really about honor or family reputation. It was about control, about needing to feel like the most important person in every room, including the one meant to celebrate me. When he realized he wasn't getting that recognition, he chose to tear me down instead of lifting me up. I told him gently but firmly that I loved him, that I would always be his child, but that I would no longer shrink myself or wait for his approval to feel proud of who I had become. I told him my aunt had shown me more support in one phone call than he had in years, and that was something I could no longer ignore. He didn't have a response. And for once, I didn't need him to. In the weeks that followed, something shifted. My father, faced publicly with the consequences of his own words, began reaching out more. Not with grand apologies, but with small efforts, a text asking how I was doing, a call just to talk. It wasn't a magical transformation. Old patterns don't disappear overnight. But it was a start, and I welcomed it cautiously, without abandoning the boundaries I had finally learned to set. My aunt, meanwhile, used part of her recognition to start a small support program for military families, helping others who felt overlooked and unappreciated the way she once had been. She became something of a quiet local hero, known not for seeking attention, but for consistently showing up. As for me, I continued serving with the same purpose that had brought me there in the first place. But something inside me had changed permanently. I no longer measured my worth by my father's approval. I measured it by the people who stood beside me when it actually mattered.